10 a.m. Don't miss it.
Good to have you with us this Saturday afternoon. Time now for our regular Saturday panel. Ben Oakwist from the Australia Institute and Daniel Wild from the Institute of Public Affairs. Ben, to you first of all, this breakthrough, as it seems, on the question of sharing the proceeds from the oil and gas resources in the East Timor Sea, been a long time coming. It does appear to be a framework agreement, but something that probably should never have got to this point, I think.
Well, indeed. I think we can't pop the champagne just yet, but it is a victory for the East Timorese government, the people, and their persistence. Remembering this process came about, the first time this UN process has ever been used, this compulsory conciliation process, because Australia refused to set permanent maritime boundaries. Remember, it withdrew from the International Court of Justice process on maritime boundaries, unheard of. The only other country that's ignoring UN law, this kind of law at the moment, of course, is China in the South China Sea. So Australia has been dragged kicking and screaming to this, and it's a testament to the East Timorese people and their government, their persistence. Remember, the Australian government spied on East Timor, as I said, withdraw from the International Court of Justice, and now we've got a framework to establish a treaty to establish permanent maritime boundaries. Now, you hope they're going to be on the midway point between East Timorese and Australia, as the East Timorese have long argued for and as international law would provide. And you would hope that the share from the Greater Sunrise Field is going to be greater than what Australia proposed in the past, because most of that field, of course, will be in East Timor's land. But the treaty's still got to be negotiated, a long way to go, but certainly looking like a big step in the right direction and a victory, a long, hard-fought-for victory from the East Timorese people through Australia's intransigence.
It does seem, Daniel, that goodwill has finally prevailed. Another couple of months, the deadline for negotiations on the details, but particularly given what Australia has been saying about Chinese behaviour in the South China Sea, it really is not a good look for a big country like Australia in comparison to an impoverished and pretty small country like East Timor to be behaving in what has seemed to be bullying tactics for so long.
Well, getting a solution and providing certainty over future commercial projects in the area will be a good thing. I think there's something like $53 billion worth of LNG resources and projects in that area, and so reaching an agreement over revenue sharing arrangements would be in the best interest of both, I think, Australia and East Timor.
Let's go to another issue. I'll stick with you, Daniel. This is the GST in WA, talking about running sores. It's been a running sore really since the end of the mining boom, and after that we saw WA's share of the GST fall to about 32 cents in the dollar, just as its economy was going into decline. Now, it may be that the West Australian Liberals and the business community are distressed and angered that there was no announcement from the Prime Minister when he addressed the West Australian Liberals State Conference today. But having set the Productivity Commission process in train, he really doesn't have a choice but to see it through.
Yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see what the Productivity Commission ends up finding and recommending. But the broader policy issue here with the GST, it's a very bad piece of public policy when it comes to the administration and implementation of it, because the distribution is based on a bad framework, which is to have the equalisation of revenues across state governments. And that's predicated on the revenue-raising capacity of those state governments. But of course, revenue-raising capacity is a function of the policies that are implemented by those state governments. Now, the issue with the current GST situation is it provides incentives for state governments not to engage in the types of economic reforms that will grow their economy, and by growing their economy, they'll be increasing their revenue base. So the only way forward from a policy perspective and from an economic perspective is to fundamentally start again with the GST. Now, I think the best way to go is just let the states keep the GST that they raise. We should get rid of this framework that we need to be equalising revenue across the states, because we have states like South Australia that are imposing bank taxes. They're sabotaging their own economic development, yet they get an increasing share of the GST pie.
Ben Oaquist, let the states keep what they raise. I'm not sure that'd meet your approval, excuse me.
Well, let's see what Erica Betts thinks of that, or Tasmania thinks of that. I mean, the point of having a equalisation process is because we're a federation. But I think the thing that gets missed here about the GST is that it's a system where you get paid not just on the figures for the last year, but average over the last few years, i.e. Western Australia was getting over the odds during the mining boom. Now, are they going to give some of that money back? I think we need to get some perspective in this debate. If Western Australia wanted some more revenue, they should have put on the $5 a tonne iron ore tax as proposed by Brendan Grills. Unfortunately, that was defeated by an unholy alliance of Labor, the Greens and the Mining Council over there. It would have raised $11.5 billion over 5 years. It wouldn't have affected new mining operations. It would have meant there was much more revenue flowing into the Treasury coffers in Western Australia. I think you have to step back and think, what did we get out of this boom? Now, how was it handled so badly that Western Australia seemed to blow the money up against the wall during the mining boom? It's historically and proportionally one of the biggest mining booms that we've had, and even on an international scale. Now, where did that money go? Obviously, the money wasn't wasted. We can't argue that the mining boom should have been bigger. It was one of the biggest yet. Now, I fear that policymakers in Australia, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, don't learn the lessons. Booms are called booms for a reason. They're followed by a bust. And unless we pocket some of that money and resources for the state or the Commonwealth for a longer period of time, I've pointed at Norway's Sovereign Wealth Fund, then on the backside of the boom, the money is not there. And I think we need to learn some bigger policy lessons from what's going on in Western Australia. We've got this rush to kind of fix the GST system that's only going to hurt some other poorer state, without looking at the bigger way that Australia is mishandling resource booms at a state and federal level, and not getting taxpayers not getting a fair share of that resource.
It is a problem with what you were suggesting, is it not, Daniel, that if you were simply to allow the states to hang on to what they've got, that the big states, New South Wales and Victoria, as well as Western Australia and Queensland, would do better than they're doing at the moment, but poorer states like Tasmania and South Australia in particular would do much, much worse and would not be able to provide the same kinds of services that people expect, whether they live in Perth, Brisbane or Hobart.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because what it would do is provide incentives for those states to engage in economic reform that's going to grow their economy. Now, not all states have the type of resources that Queensland and Western Australia do, but although we know that, you know, South Australia, to take an example, has something like 30 or 40% of the world's uranium supplies. Now, why aren't they developing those? Why aren't they being used as a vehicle for job creation and business investment? So,
but a state like Tasmania, in particular, is never going to have the critical mass that enables it to develop, say, services in the way that, in particular, Sydney and Melbourne can.
Well, the current GST approach, though, doesn't resolve that issue, because it further embeds it by not having the incentives for Tasmania to reform its economy. So the long-term structural problems that you may have in states like South Australia or Tasmania aren't going to be resolved by simply increasing the amount of handouts they get. At the end of the day, they're going to have to engage in economic reform and structurally reform their economies to develop comparative advantages to drive growth there in the future.
I want to turn briefly, if we can, to another issue development during the week. Defence Minister Marise Payne is on her way to the Philippines to talk with the Philippines government about the way in which some Australian Special Services forces may be deployed to assist the Philippines Army in its struggle to defeat IS insurgents in the southern Philippines in the city of Marawi. The Prime Minister saying that we did not want to see Marawi become another Raqqa. Ben Oaquist, distasteful as the government of the Philippines is at the moment, the Prime Minister does have a point, does he not? And the situation in the southern Philippines, where there's been Islamist insurgents for decades, it really does provide an opportunity for IS to get more than a foothold in a region which is very close to Australia.
It's true that it's a decades-old dispute, and there have been kind of off and on peace talks over a number of years, and the problem is that those peace talks are progressing, and some more radical jihadists are moving in there while those peace talks are going on. And I noticed that with the Defence Minister going over there on Friday, the Australian government is ruling out any combat role for our troops. But I do think, which is wise, but I do think it needs to be looked at in slightly broader context, in that as distasteful as you said the Philippines leadership is, and potentially some 7,000 extrajudicial killings. So we want to be very careful about the way that we embolden or encourage Duterte, because he has a horrific human rights record, a murderous record. So it is important that we are careful in how we deal with them. But the Philippines government has to be encouraged to do more to develop regions. And terrorism and discontent has bred in Mindanao because of corruption, because of lack of development. And unless Australia takes a longer term look at how we help, not just in a military suggestion, but encouraging the Philippines government to do more to develop Mindanao, the problem will continue to flare up. So Australia has to take a much more holistic approach than just helping out Duterte in a military sense.
And Daniel Wild, as I was saying, distasteful as President Duterte is, and his behaviour, particularly the extrajudicial killings, this is a situation in Marawi which clearly the Philippines government and military are struggling to contain. To have Australian soldiers advising and assisting is really in our interest, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, radical Islamic terrorism and ISIS are real and present and immediate dangers to the world and to the Southeast Asian region and to Australia. So providing the support that we can to the Philippine government to be able to neutralise and to drive ISIS out of the Philippines is crucial to being able to prevent ISIS from gaining a foothold in Southeast Asia from which they could expand. And so that would be very damaging to Australia and very damaging to our national interests, and providing the support to the Philippine government is absolutely crucial, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Briefly, before we go, this issue on the eve of Father's Day, of this commercial, Dads for Kids, which has been pulled by Free Television Australia because it does not contain a disclaimer. Ben Oaquist, this is not the sort of thing that the Yes campaign in the same-sex survey would be wanting at this stage, is it?
Well, I saw Tim Wilson condemn Free TV Australia for his decision. I noticed, but I think it's a bit of a beat-up, Jim. I mean, I've seen Free TV Australia's statement this afternoon saying they haven't banned the ad. They thought it should carry a disclaimer, an authorisation. An authorisation, as many ads on TV have to claim. What I thought was disgraceful is Tony Abbott and Zed Seselja rushing out there to claim that this was the start of political correctness. If you voted for gay marriage, this is what will be next. That's what I thought was despicable. And they're not winning the debate on gay marriage. They're going to throw up all these kind of distractions and claim that this is what life's going to be like in the future under gay marriage. I'm going to be celebrating Father's Day with my daughter tomorrow, and I'm sure all dads are, and there's no suggestion that because we're going to have gay marriage, and because Free TV Australia is confused about whether an ad needs authorisation or not, somehow Father's Day is going to be at risk in the future. It's nonsense. It's nonsense from Tony Abbott and Zed Seldra. It's complete beat up. Get on and enjoy Father's Day would be my advice to all dads.
And Daniel Wild, are Zed Seldra, Tony Abbott guilty of exploiting what was a pretty innocent event?
No, look, I think they have a very important point to make, and it's what the No campaign has been saying, that there are issues pertaining to freedoms and to traditions in this country if gay marriage goes ahead. And I think it's deeply troubling and disappointing.
Daniel, you can't be serious that if gay marriage goes ahead, are you suggesting we're going to have ads banned on TV? There's no connection with it.
And I think what this shows is, what we've seen over the last 4 decades is the banner under which the left have been marching is that the personal is political. And what that means is you can't differentiate personal decisions from them being political statements, and it's inevitable that we'll continue to see things like being a mother and a father and having a nuclear family as being seen as the ultimate political action, which is in need of censorship by the government.
So no debate about gay marriage from the opponents of it. I mean, they just argue everything other than gay marriage to try and win this debate because they can't win on equal marriage because they know it's indefensible to oppose it. So we throw up all these kind of other red herrings. Let's get on and legislate for equal marriage and get on with it like most of our other comparable countries have done.
Clearly not going to get any agreement there, but do appreciate your time, both of you. Ben Oakwist from the Australia Institute and Daniel Wild from the Institute of Public Affairs. Thanks very much to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Jim.